on the law of the sea watered down many of the sort of redistributive aspects that one could argue had Keynesian elements to them, that were intended to redistribute from, the results of centuries of extraction and exploitation, watered down the various elements of the agreement as it had been drafted. And one of the things that it expressly states, this implementation agreement that was signed in 1994, is that market principles will trump or are equally important to principles for global equity that are explicitly stated in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The principle of the common heritage of mankind, which came out of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, is considered, I think, still one of the most important, liberal equity principles in international law. So, while the mineral extraction in the seabed beyond state jurisdiction is in its physical infancy, the global debates concerning property rights on the high seas were central to the history of international law. And today, although the United States has yet to ratify the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, it plays a significant role at the annual meetings of the International Seabed Authority, in that many U.S. environmental NGOs are present there, and various foundations, U.S.-based foundations, are financing a lot of the marine research about the deep seabed. And there are three main categories of mineral that are under the purview of the International Seabed Authority to offer concessions for. These are polymetallic nodules, polymetallic sulfates, and cobalt-rich crusts. And there's a number of different locations where the International Seabed Authority has given exploration licenses and concessions, although there's no actual mining now. There's a number in the Pacific, in the Atlantic, in the South Atlantic, and on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. There's one in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean, but the most important in terms of the number of contractors is the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which is in the Pacific between Hawaii and Mexico. And the Clarion-Clipperton Zone has, I think now, 17 different contractors operating there. So when I was starting, when I started to sort of follow what was going on at the International Seabed Authority, what I initially, sparked my interest, especially with a lot of attention now to Canadian imperialism globally, and particularly in Latin America, was the role of a particular Canadian firm called Nautilus Minerals, which was seeking a whole bunch of concessions at once at the 2012 or 2013, I'm trying to remember which year, session of the International Seabed Authority. And to do that, it sought to implement one of the provisions of the Law of the Sea, which is for the creation of something called the enterprise. And the enterprise came out of the discussions among among the G77, basically, and was announced first by the representative of Trinidad and Tobago in 1970 at the negotiations for the Law of the Sea, as a kind of global parastatal, or I guess we could call it paraglobal, a firm that would exist to carry out mining of the deep seabed, that would be the prime operator in this area, and that would shape the regulatory regime and the redistributive regime for all the other firms operating there. And the Global South was quite adamant about the creation of the enterprise as a means to ensure greater redistribution of wealth from the international seabed. Today, at the International Seabed Authority, the enterprise is frequently invoked as something that should be created, but it hasn't actually been operationalized except for sort of discursively. So there's no actual institutional mechanism for the enterprise. So I was interested in the fact that this Canadian firm, Nautilus Minerals, it's very much a product of global capital, and its executives are also Australia, New Zealand, and lots of investment from various other parts of the world, but was sort of engaging in this practice. And I started to write about this, and eventually I was able to secure an interview by Skype with somebody from Nautilus Minerals who said to me, in our desire for partnership with the enterprise, we were actually seeking to put into practice, to implement the equity principles that the Global South sought. And so, that was why we sought partnership with the enterprise, as opposed to thinking about it through mercantilist eyes, which is